Welcome to Life Stories, where we share inspiring journeys of resilience, growth, and triumph. In today's story, we follow Emily Carter, a seasoned hospitality expert who faces betrayal and heartbreak within her own family. After sacrificing everything to save her family's struggling lodge, Emily is overlooked in favor of her inexperienced brother. But instead of giving up, she takes a bold leap to create something extraordinary, a boutique hotel that becomes the pinnacle of her success. This is a tale of finding strength, reclaiming independence, and building a legacy against all odds. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's inspiring journey. My name is Emily Carter, and at 52, I never imagined I'd be fighting for my place in my family's legacy. For decades, I carved out a name for myself in the hospitality industry. I worked my way up from front desk manager to regional director for a major hotel chain in Chicago. Every achievement was hard-earned, and every success felt like a stepping stone toward something greater. But all of that crumbled when my family called for help. The Willow Creek Lodge, nestled in the heart of Colorado, was our family's pride and joy. Or so I thought. Built by my grandparents in the 1970s. It was more than a business, it was where I spent my childhood, learning the ins and outs of the trade. While other kids played outside, I was helping my mom check in guests or watching my dad fix a leaky faucet in one of the guest rooms. It wasn't just a building, it was a piece of who I was. Yet, life had other plans. I moved to Chicago for college, studied hospitality management, and never really looked back. My younger brother, Jason, stayed closer to home, or rather, he floated around Colorado, bouncing from one short-lived venture to another. He was the family's golden boy, always full of potential, as my parents liked to put it. Meanwhile, I worked tirelessly, earning promotions, building teams, and making a name for myself in a fiercely competitive industry. 8 months ago, my dad called me. His voice cracked as he explained that the Willow Creek Lodge was weeks away from bankruptcy. Reviews online were brutal, outdated and overpriced. Staff lacks training. Desperately needs modernizing. The lodge had become a shadow of its former self, and the thought of losing it broke my heart. I didn't hesitate. I sold my condo in Chicago, cashed in my savings, and moved back to Colorado. The lodge was in worse shape than I'd imagined. The lobby was stuck in a time warp. The reservation system was practically prehistoric, and the staff were overwhelmed and undertrained. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. The first month was a whirlwind of repairs, retraining, and rebranding. I replaced the threadbare carpeting, updated the website, and trained staff on how to deliver exceptional service. Every penny I spent was calculated to bring maximum return on investment. I even tapped into my industry contacts to feature the lodge in travel magazines. Slowly but surely, things began to change. Bookings doubled, and the lodge started turning a profit for the first time in years. Guests raved about the new decor, the locally sourced artwork, and the modern amenities I'd introduced. It felt like breathing life back into something I loved. But my parents didn't seem to notice. They'd sit in meetings, nodding absent-mindedly as I presented data showing our progress. Then one day, Jason waltzed in with a smug grin, his hands stuffed in his pockets as he looked around the newly renovated lobby. "Wow, Emily," he said, his voice dripping with mock surprise. "You really spruced the place up. Looks nice." I didn't respond. I knew Jason well enough to recognize when he was laying the groundwork for something. A week later, I found out what it was. My parents sat me down in their cozy, sunlit kitchen, the same place where so many family meals had taken place. My mom stirred sugar into her coffee, avoiding my eyes, while my dad cleared his throat. "Emily, we've decided to make Jason the CEO of the lodge," my dad announced, his voice steady but almost apologetic. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What? Jason?" Mom reached for my hand. Her touch meant to soothe. "Sweetheart, you've done a wonderful job bringing the lodge back to life. But Jason has a natural talent for leadership. You're so detail-oriented, it's better if you focus on operations while he handles the big picture." Her words felt like a slap in the face. Natural talent. Jason had never held a job for more than a year. He had no experience, no qualifications, and no vision for the business I had poured my heart and soul into saving. Jason walked in then, his signature grin plastered across his face. "Hey, sis," he said, as if nothing had happened. "Don't take it personally. Someone's gotta do the day-to-day stuff while I focus on, strategy." I couldn't believe it. The same man who had barely contributed during the lodge's darkest days was now being handed the reins. I tried to reason with my parents, showing them spreadsheets, glowing guest reviews, and financial projections. My dad stared into his coffee, while my mom simply patted my hand and said, "You need to give your brother time to find his footing. He has such wonderful ideas." Wonderful ideas? Jason's first act as CEO was to cut the complimentary breakfast service, a feature guests adored and one of our highest-rated amenities. When I tried to explain why this was a bad move, he dismissed me with a laugh. "Numbers aren't everything, Emily." The breaking point came when he fired Maria, our head housekeeper of 15 years, for not being flexible enough about his erratic scheduling demands. Maria was more than an employee, she was family. I intervened to save her job. But the damage was done. Jason's arrogance and incompetence were tearing apart the very foundation of the lodge. And my parents refused to see it. One evening, after yet another argument with Jason, I went for a drive to clear my head. That's when I saw it, the Riverside Inn. Its for sale sign gleamed under the fading sunlight. And my heart raced. Once a competitor of Willow Creek Lodge, the inn had fallen into disrepair in recent years. But I could see its potential: better views, closer to the ski slopes, and a spacious property begging for a second chance. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, my mind racing. This was my chance to create something of my own, something that wasn't overshadowed by family dynamics or Jason's recklessness. I called a realtor the next morning, and by the end of the week, I'd made an offer. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of excitement. I wasn't just saving something old, I was building something new. Something that was entirely mine. The decision to buy the Riverside Inn was both terrifying and exhilarating. For years, I had lived under the weight of my family's expectations, bending and twisting myself to fit their version of success. But sitting in the car that evening, staring at the fading paint of the inn's facade, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about proving my worth anymore, it was about carving out a space for myself in a world where my contributions were valued, not dismissed. The first time I walked through the doors of the Riverside Inn, it was like stepping into a ghost of what it once had been. The place smelled of mildew and neglect, and the furniture was worn down to threads. Dust clung to every surface, and the faded floral wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. But beneath the decay, I saw potential. The property was perfectly positioned on a hill overlooking the valley, offering breathtaking views of the surrounding peaks. It was closer to the ski slopes than Willow Creek Lodge and had a larger footprint, including a spacious event hall that could be transformed into something extraordinary. While others might have seen a lost cause, I saw a canvas, a blank slate to create something beautiful. From that moment, I threw myself into the project. Every decision, every choice felt personal. I wanted this space to reflect my vision of hospitality, a place where every detail contributed to an unforgettable experience. Unlike at Willow Creek Lodge, where my ideas were constantly second-guessed, here I had no one to hold me back. Of course, not everyone in town saw it that way. News of my purchase spread quickly, and whispers followed. Some people called me spiteful for setting up a business in direct competition with my family. Others accused me of tearing my family apart, claiming I was driven by revenge. It stung. But I had learned to steel myself against gossip. The renovations began in earnest. Contractors tore out the old carpeting and stripped the walls to their bones. I spent countless hours designing spaces that were both modern and welcoming, cozy enough to feel like home but luxurious enough to make guests feel pampered. Every corner of the inn bore my signature touch. From the handcrafted light fixtures sourced from a local artisan to the custom furniture that blended rustic charm with contemporary elegance. I named it the Summit. Maybe it was a little on the nose. But I wanted a name that symbolized the heights I was aiming for. Jason, of course, wasn't thrilled. He showed up uninvited one evening as I was going over blueprints with the contractors. He sauntered in with his usual air of entitlement. His smile as smug as ever. "So, this is your big revenge plan." He said. His tone half joking but his words laced with bitterness. "Competing with your own family? Classy move. Emily." I didn't bother arguing with him. "This isn't about revenge, Jason. This is about doing what I love on my terms." His laughter was hollow. "Yeah, sure. Good luck with that." But I didn't need luck. I needed focus, determination, and the kind of grit that comes from knowing you've already survived worse. I worked long days, often into the night, reviewing designs, managing budgets, and building a team of top-tier professionals. Many of them were former employees of Willow Creek Lodge, people who, like me, had grown tired of Jason's chaotic leadership. The opening of the Summit, 6 months after I bought the property, was a day I'll never forget. The event hall was packed with guests, from curious locals to travel writers eager to see the newest luxury destination in Colorado. As I walked through the beautifully lit lobby, taking in the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses, I felt a swell of pride I hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't just pride, it was freedom. Freedom from the weight of my family's disapproval. Freedom from the constant fight to prove my worth. Freedom to finally live life on my own terms. The guests raved about the amenities, the state-of-the-art spa, the farm-to-table restaurant featuring locally sourced ingredients, and the breathtaking mountain views from every room. Travel magazines called it a new standard for boutique hospitality, and online reviews flooded in, each more glowing than the last. Meanwhile, back at Willow Creek Lodge, things were falling apart. Jason's impulsive decisions were taking their toll. Maintenance issues went unresolved. Service became inconsistent. And longtime staff began to quit. Guests started leaving scathing reviews. And the lodge's reputation began to crumble. My parents tried to guilt-trip me into stepping back into the fold. "This isn't what family does," my mom said during one of our rare dinners. "You're tearing us apart." But I didn't waver. This wasn't about tearing anyone down, it was about building something up. Something that was entirely mine. I started hearing whispers that Willow Creek Lodge had to slash its rates just to maintain occupancy. Jason stopped attending industry events, dismissing them as popularity contests. But I knew the truth, he couldn't face the reality of his own failures. And while Jason floundered, the Summit soared. We were nominated for awards, featured in high-profile travel publications, and quickly became the go-to destination for luxury travelers. For the first time in my life, I felt seen not as someone's daughter, or someone's sister, but as someone who had built something extraordinary from the ground up. Looking back, those 6 months were some of the hardest and most rewarding of my life. I wasn't just rebuilding an inn, I was rebuilding myself. And as the Summit rose, so did I. The success of the Summit felt like a dream. For years, I had measured my worth by how much I could give to my family and how they viewed me. Now, for the first time, I was living life on my terms. Every morning, I walked into the lobby and felt a profound sense of pride. The warm wood accents, the gleaming stone fireplace, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, it was all mine. Guests lingered over coffee in the lounge, marveling at the spectacular views of the valley below. The chatter of excited vacationers and the smiles of my staff reminded me why I had chosen this path. But success didn't come without its challenges. My parents couldn't ignore what was happening at Willow Creek Lodge. Jason's leadership, or lack thereof, had turned a once thriving family business into a sinking ship. Maintenance issues piled up. Guest satisfaction plummeted. And key staff members left, taking their expertise with them. The breaking point came when my parents visited me at the summit one morning. It wasn't the usual awkward, obligatory visit. This time, they looked genuinely worried. My mom's usually polished demeanor seemed frazzled, her hands twisting nervously. My dad sat stiffly in one of the plush chairs in my office, avoiding eye contact. "Emily," my dad began, his voice heavy with something I couldn't quite place, shame. "Maybe. We need your help." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. This was a conversation I had anticipated but never wanted to have. "Jason's in over his head," my mom added quickly, as though trying to soften the blow. "The bank is threatening to call the loans. We've tried to give him time to find his footing. But we're running out of time." I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly buried under years of frustration and hurt. "You want me to come back and fix it?" My dad nodded. "Not as CEO," he clarified, almost apologetically, "but to help Jason learn the ropes. He's young, he just needs guidance." I stared at them, trying to process what they were asking. After everything I had done to save the lodge, after being passed over and dismissed, they wanted me to step in and clean up Jason's mess. It wasn't anger I felt in that moment, it was clarity. "I offered to help a year ago," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I gave up my life in Chicago to save Willow Creek Lodge. And you chose to put Jason in charge. You didn't trust me then. And I'm sorry. But I can't do this now." My mom opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "I'll give you advice if you want it. I can recommend strategies, suppliers, even training programs. But I'm not coming back to fix this. That's not my responsibility anymore." My dad muttered something about understanding my position, but the disappointment on his face was clear. My mom looked like she wanted to fight me on it. But for once, she stayed quiet. After they left, I sat in my office, staring out at the snow-covered peaks. I felt lighter than I had in years. Setting those boundaries wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For too long, I had bent over backward trying to win their approval, sacrificing my own happiness in the process. But this time, I chose myself. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in me. Saying no to my parents gave me the confidence to enforce boundaries in other areas of my life. I stopped over-explaining my decisions to people who didn't deserve an explanation. I let go of relationships that drained me and focused on the ones that brought joy and support. Meanwhile, the summit continued to flourish. Our occupancy rates were the highest in the region, and we began receiving inquiries from boutique hotel owners across the country asking for consulting advice. My team, many of whom had followed me from Willow Creek Lodge, became like a second family. Together, we celebrated every milestone, from receiving our first 5-star review to being featured in a major travel publication. Back at Willow Creek Lodge, things continued to decline. I heard through the grapevine that my parents finally hired a professional hospitality consultant, someone with the expertise to undo the damage Jason had done. I wished them well, but I didn't look back. The real turning point came at the Colorado Luxury Hospitality Awards. The summit was nominated for Boutique Hotel of the Year, an honor I hadn't dared to dream of when I first started this journey. As I sat in the ballroom surrounded by my team, the announcer began listing the nominees. When the summit was announced as the winner, the room erupted in applause. My heart raced as I walked to the stage, the weight of the moment pressing on me. As I accepted the award, I glanced toward the back of the room, where my parents were seated. My dad gave me a small nod, and my mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. That night, I celebrated with my team. raising a glass to everything we had accomplished together. My parents didn't approach me, and I didn't go to them. This was my moment, shared with the people who had helped me build something extraordinary. Standing there, surrounded by the people who truly valued me, I realized something important. Success wasn't about proving anyone wrong, it was about proving to myself that I was capable, deserving, and enough. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from the weight of my family's expectations, but from the shadows of my own doubts. I had built something beautiful, something meaningful, and that was more than enough. As I stood in the lobby of the summit one quiet evening, watching the soft glow of the sunset bathe the mountains in warm light, I reflected on how far I had come. The laughter of guests echoed around me, a testament to the life and energy this place now held. It wasn't just a hotel, it was a symbol of resilience, vision, and the courage to carve my own path. The journey hadn't been easy. Letting go of my family's validation was painful, and building the summit tested every ounce of my strength. But through it all, I discovered something profound. My worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. It was something I carried within myself, waiting to be embraced. Now, as the summit flourishes, I feel an immense sense of pride, not just in what I've created but in who I've become. This is my story, one of perseverance, growth, and learning to stand tall in my own light. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales of resilience, love, and triumph. See you in the next chapter of life.